This is a video about competition and collaboration. It's about the hidden rules that affects peacocks, fancy watch collectors, climate change negotiations, nuclear disarmament, autonomous weapons, and the race to build superhuman AI. It's also about why countries that were literally spending trillions of dollars to point nuclear warheads at each other's capital cities and threatening the world with nuclear annihilation could also simultaneously collaborate to eliminate smallpox. It's about game theory and how more or less everything is a game theory problem. And if we play that game, sooner or later, we will all lose. But this video is also about the Nobel Prize winning research that showed that there is a way out, that there is a way to make collaboration not only possible, but likely. Say you're a tree. You need sunlight to live. That's how you make your energy. And you have a neighbor tree that also needs sunlight to live. You and your neighbor tree are currently both 10 feet tall. But then you realize that you can get a little bit more sunlight by growing a little bit taller. So you grow to 11 feet. And now your neighbor tree gets less sunlight and has to grow to 11 feet as well to keep up. And then you grow to 12 feet and your neighbor grows to 12 feet. And now it's an arms race. The tallest trees in the world can grow to over 100 meters tall. But here's the thing, growing taller comes at a big cost. For a tree that's 1,000 kilograms in mass, only about 1.5% of that are in the leaves, which are the thing that actually supplies energy. Ferns that live on the floor don't need to invest in a trunk or stems or branches. They can be entirely made out of leaves. They're technically called fronds, but you get the idea. There's a giant sequoia tree named General Sherman. It's the biggest tree on Earth by volume. It has a mass of 1,900 tons, but the leaves only account for 1.7 tons, less than 0.1% of the mass. The rest, over 99.9% of its total mass, is a massive waste of resources. It's only there to compete in an arms race against other trees. Don't get me wrong, I love trees and I love big trees, but all I'm saying is that their lives would be easier if they weren't competing with each other. Now, there are trees that grow tall even when they aren't surrounded by other trees, but that's because this arms race mentality is encoded in their genetics. Trees that could grow tall and spread their seeds were able to do that, so they passed on their grow tall genes. And no single tree is responsible for the arms race. They're just doing the best that they can to lead to a good outcome for themselves. But this does lead to a worse outcome for everyone involved, because now everyone needs to keep up. And this arms race is evident in other species. The reason that male peacocks grow these giant bright tails is to attract the females. But so do all the other male peacocks, which means that over generations the tails keep getting bigger, more elaborate, more metabolically expensive, and harder to escape predators with. The Irish elk, now extinct, had antlers spanning up to 4.2 meters. These antlers were also an arms race. An elk with bigger antlers won more fights, but it was mostly for sexual selection, like the peacock's tail. But if everyone else also had massive antlers, you were just back to where you started, just with a heavier head that's very metabolically expensive because you need to regrow these antlers every year. Up until the 1930s, it was believed that the Irish elk went extinct because of the large antlers. This isn't true. It's much more likely that they went extinct due to a changing climate. Their habitat shifted from open grassland to forest, which reduced the available food to sustain themselves. So the big antlers didn't lead to extinction, but the arms race was real nonetheless. It's honestly silly how many places this kind of arms race turns up. I mean, look at this crab. This is the fiddler crab, and it's more than half claw. Sometimes 65% of the crab's mass is just that one claw. Ridiculous. Amazing. All of these examples can be explained with a mathematical framework called game theory, which was formalized by John von Neumann back in 1944. When you buy a fancy watch, to impress people at your finance job, and then a coworker buys a fancier one, well, now you need to get an even fancier one. So a Rolex won't do, it has to be a Patek Philippe. This explains so much about conspicuous consumption, the luxury handbags and the supercars. It's all peacocking, and it's all driven by this arms race. This also happened in music. Music producers discovered that songs that were louder on the radio were perceived as better, so they started compressing and limiting their tracks to make them louder. But then everyone else did the same thing. So they compress the music more and more until you get distortion and clipping and loss of all dynamic range. The loud bits were too loud and the quiet bits were also too loud. Every individual producer was making the rational choice. My song needs to be at least as loud as the competition. But the result was that everyone's music sounded worse. This was known as the loudness wars, and everyone lost. And this happens with YouTube thumbnails. Every YouTuber is stuck in this arms race where everyone's trying to make the best, most clickable, most appealing title and thumbnail combination that they can make. So that leads to a lot of clickbait. This specific game is called the Prisoner's Dilemma. The basic gist is that it describes a situation where two players can either cooperate or defect. And even though they'd both be better off cooperating, the rational move for each individual is to defect, which leaves them both worse off. Now, I want to be clear, competition isn't always a bad thing. You can be competitive with your friends and push each other at the gym, which makes everyone fitter. Or you can be competitive in the market, which makes better products for cheaper, which benefits the consumer. So not all situations can or should be modeled as a prisoner's dilemma, but many can be. The nuclear arms race is a classic example. In 1945, the US dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. 4 years later, the Soviets tested their first bomb. And now both sides had a choice to stop or to build more. And the rational choice is to build more, because if you stop and the other side doesn't, you're defenseless. So you build more, they build more, you build more. By 1986, there were over 60,000 nuclear warheads on the planet. This spiral nearly killed all humanity many times. We got so close to nuclear annihilation that it's not even funny. And we're still not out of the woods. There's still more than 12,000 nukes in the world. But even ignoring the existential risk, this whole thing is such a waste. Between 1940 and 1996, adjusted for inflation, the United States alone spent more than $11 trillion on nuclear weapons and weapon defenses. The numbers here are a little tricky, but it's estimated that something like $500 billion over the next decade could end tuberculosis, HIV, malaria, and neglected tropical diseases as public health threats. Not fully eliminate them, but get these diseases under control. Tuberculosis alone kills more than 1 million people a year. I'm going to emphasize something here. These nuclear weapons that both the United States and the Soviet Union were building, they were building them with the explicit hope of never needing to use them, because if they did, it would end catastrophically for everyone on the planet. And yet, trillions and trillions of dollars were spent on this. So much money and brain power instead of saving the lives of literally hundreds of millions of people. The opportunity cost is staggering. When trees are locked in an arms race, it's kind of beautiful. When crabs and elk are, it's just kind of silly. And when humans are, it just feels really sad. In 1986, Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev met in Reykjavik, Iceland. Gorbachev proposed something radical: to eliminate all nuclear weapons in 3 stages by the end of the millennium. And to everyone's surprise, Reagan said, "It would be fine with me if we eliminated all nuclear weapons." And Gorbachev said, "Yeah, we can do that. Let's eliminate them." They spent the next few hours negotiating, but they couldn't make it work. Both players in this prisoner's dilemma wanted to cooperate. Both said so out loud to each other's faces, and they still couldn't do it because neither could afford to be the one that disarmed first. Wow, this video is super depressing. Peter, you told me there was hope. You told me that game theory showed a way out. Well, good news. There are plenty of cases where people cooperate, even when it really feels like they shouldn't. In 1958, the Deputy Minister of Health for the Soviet Union, Dr. Viktor Zhdanov, gave a speech at the Assembly of the World Health Organization. In the speech, he proposed something very audacious: to eradicate smallpox. In 1958, smallpox was a really big deal, infecting tens of millions of people and killing a large percentage of those. It's a horrible disease. Across the 20th century as a whole, smallpox killed an estimated 300 to 500 million people, much more than both world wars combined. The wild thing is there has been a vaccine for smallpox since 1796. So by 1958, when Zhdanov proposed eradication, humanity has had the tools to beat smallpox for 162 years. But this was the middle of the Cold War. Collaboration between the United States and the Soviet Union seemed very unlikely, what with all the nuclear weapons pointed at each other's capital cities. And yet, it happened. The World Health Organization appointed an American, Donald Henderson, to run the program. The Soviets initially objected to having an American in charge. Then they checked him out and they decided they trusted him and got behind him. The Soviet Union donated 1.4 billion vaccine doses. The United States contributed nearly 200 million, and other countries supplied plenty of vaccines too. And this worked. This program worked. It saved millions of lives. While the United States and the Soviet Union were building more and more nukes, they were also collaborating to get rid of smallpox. The last natural case was in 1977, and in 1980, the World Health Organization declared that smallpox was eradicated forever. Side note, it only cost around $300 million to do that, about the cost of one nuclear submarine at the time. And the US government recoups the entire investment every 26 days in savings from no longer vaccinating or treating smallpox. And countries have cooperated with other things too, like directly governing the rules of war. The horrors of the use of chemical weapons in World War I led to the 1925 Geneva Protocol, which banned the use of chemical weapons. It did not ban the development and production of stockpiling, so countries signed the protocol, but they were continuing to build enormous reserves. It took a little while, 70 more years or so, but we did get the Chemical Weapons Convention, which came into force in 1997, which did ban the production and stockpiling of chemical weapons. There's a similar ban for biological weapons, and there's also a protocol on blinding laser weapons, basically banning the use of lasers designed to blind people. All of this feels unambiguously good to me. It makes sense to collectively commit ourselves to agree that there are lines that we will simply not cross, even in war. Do I think this is perfect? No. Is it better than the alternative? Yeah, seems so. So, what's with that? I thought humans were stuck in this arms race. Why is there cooperation in some places and not in others? To make sense of this, I want to tell you about Robert Axelrod. I co-wrote a video about Axelrod back when I worked at Veritasium, so if you want to go into the details, you should watch that video. Back in 1980, Axelrod invited game theorists to submit computer programs to play The Prisoner's Dilemma, not once, but over and over again. This is known as the iterated Prisoner's Dilemma. And the winner was the simplest program in the entire tournament, called Tit for Tat. All it did was it would cooperate on the first move and then copy whatever the other player did. So it would start nice, and then it would mirror. It's kind of wild that something so simple won the entire tournament. Axelrod published the results, and he ran the tournament again. And everyone knew that Tit for Tat had won, so everyone designed programs to try to beat it. But it won again. He later identified 4 properties that he believed made Tit for Tat work so well. It's nice. It never betrays first. It's retaliatory. betray it, and it will hit right back. But it's also forgiving. If you start cooperating again, it will start cooperating too. And it's really clear. The opponents always know exactly what to expect. And the iterated prison's dilemma is frankly so much more realistic to real life. A lot of times you actually keep interacting with the same people. There's this thing in economics known as the tragedy of the commons. Basically, you have a communal meadow and a bunch of farmers. Each farmer benefits by adding one more cow to the pasture, to the meadow. But the cost of overgrazing is shared by everyone. So the incentive for the farmer is to keep adding more and more cows until the pasture is destroyed for everyone. Garrett Harding, who coined the term and came up with the thought experiment, wanted to show the damage that innocent actions by individuals can inflict on the environment. I was actually taught about the tragedy of the commons back in high school in economics class, so I wanted to dig deeper into this. So I want to introduce you to the work of Elinor Ostrom. During her PhD in the early 1960s, she was looking at how people were using groundwater basins in Southern California. When there are too many wells and they're all pumping out too much fresh groundwater, the decrease in the pressure in the aquifer allows for the salt water from the ocean to seep in, which threatens the entire water supply. This is known as saltwater intrusion, and it's a classic tragedy of the commons scenario. But what Ostrom found is that instead of the resource being destroyed, she saw that it was actually really well managed. She saw that people that should have been trapped in a prisoner's dilemma figured out how to cooperate. They negotiated pumping limits, they created monitoring systems, and they built their own institutions to manage the shared resource. So she kept looking for more evidence, and she found that responsible management of the commons was everywhere, from communities in Japan managing forests to farmers in the Swiss Alps who have literally successfully grazed their cows on a common meadow for the past 500 years, to communal irrigation systems in Nepal and the Philippines and Spain, all over the world. She spent her career studying over 800 communities to figure out when and how people get together and cooperate, even if externally it seems really unlikely that they would. She ended up winning the 2009 prize in economics for this work. So when do people cooperate? Well, Ostrom found that when communities follow 8 of these rules, they're able to successfully manage their commons. If you want to read about all of them, the link is in the description. Her book is really, really good, but I just want to highlight a few: monitoring, graduated sanctions, and collective choice. Monitoring is how you detect defection, which then you can retaliate to. And graduated sanctions? Well, you don't permanently exile someone for one mistake. You are forgiving, but the punishments do get more and more severe with repeat offenses. And collective choice? Well, when everyone helps write the rules, everyone understands them, so there's no confusion about what cooperation looks like. Everyone agrees to this. Doesn't this remind you of Axelrod's tit-for-tat result? For me, this seems like there's just more evidence that the optimal strategy is to be nice, retaliatory, forgiving, and clear. If we follow these principles, collaboration seems very much possible. I'm making this video because we're in a really spicy place in the world with a couple of things. I'm really concerned about the situation with AI. Right now, there are a handful of companies that are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into building the most powerful AI systems that they can. And they're doing it as fast as they can, despite the heads of these companies and world experts in AI telling everyone how potentially catastrophic AI could be. The experts are saying that if we build super intelligent AI, it will likely lead to the extinction of all humans. Like, we're not going in the right direction.
It's probably a race between climate change and AI is going to win.
Demis Hassabis and Dario Amodei, the heads of Google, DeepMind, and Anthropic, talked about slowing down and doing this more carefully together in Davos.
I think the other issue is the geopolitical competition. There's obviously competition between the companies, but also US and China primarily. So unless there's an international cooperation or understanding around this, which I think would be good actually in terms of things like minimum safety standards for deployment, I think Dario would agree on that as well. I think it's vitally needed.
But they and the other companies are still racing ahead, because if you pause and they don't, you've just handed the most powerful technology in history to someone else. And you know that they're not going to build it safely, so you might as well try, even if you think there are catastrophic existential risks involved. A lot of people in the AI space want to slow down, but they feel like they can't. They feel like they're stuck in this arms race. But they're wrong. They can stop. We can all stop. We can totally get international collaboration to stop this AI race and agree to develop AI systems in a safe way. There's so much international collaboration, it's not even funny. We have so much evidence of us actually being able to work together. I'm also making this video because there's a push at the UN for a ban on lethal autonomous weapons. This is really important. The genie isn't fully out of the bottle on killer robots just yet, and we should close the lid while we still can. This is very, very possible. I'm not being naive here. Look, I know the world's a mess. I feel it. I feel the intensity of this moment, and I'm sure you do too. And I know how many problems there are to solve. And I know how hopeless it can feel. I know how precarious this moment feels like. I am just saying that human beings aren't trees. We have agency. We can get out of this arms race. We can talk to one another, to agree to treaties, and to hold each other accountable to them. We can cooperate, and we've done it in the past. We are doomed to be a never-ending arms race towards Armageddon. There's example after example after example of humans finding ways to collaborate, even if it seems highly unlikely. The evidence is there, and I do find that at least somewhat hopeful. None of this will be easy. Decreasing the existential risks and making the world better and safer is going to take a lot of effort from all of us, but I do believe that it's possible. So I finished making this video and I realized that it might seem like I'm being a little bit unfair to trees. I just want to clear that up. I really love trees. I think they're really great. And there are also clearly cases where trees do collaborate. There's this phenomenon called crown shyness, where trees, usually of the same species, their leaves don't end up touching. We don't fully know how or why that works, but there's clearly also collaboration within the tree kingdom. I just wanted to clear that up. I really love trees. The point that I'm trying to make is that humans have a lot of autonomy. We can decide, we can make choices, and the choices can be good, and the choices can be to collaborate. That's all I'm saying. Yay trees.